We've got a mic roving. So yeah, right over here. So just put your hand up when you get the mic. Just tell us who you are and where you work. Yeah, gentleman right here, and then we'll come to you.
Good evening, Keith. Alan Hayes from IGD. Let's pretend, or let's imagine that there's a point out there in the future where collectively and other global organizations have actually created the sustainable future that everyone in this room would like to live long enough to see. What will we see? Will it be organizations like Unilever who are people-centric that dominate the world? Or will we still see supply chains and ecosystems full of the diversity of big, small, and in-between businesses? What actually will the shape of that future be from a brand and from an organization perspective?
Well, obviously, I don't know the future, and so I couldn't give you a definitive answer. But I think diversity is important in all forms. So I would hope the future would be a combination of smaller companies and organizations, etc., and larger ones which can bring different types of efficiencies and help manage the agenda across different platforms. Certainly, I can think of nothing more dull than having the same sort of cut and paste thing, all across the world. And I think variety is really important. And I think it's one thing that the internet supported beautifully as well, is the ability to have niche and different ideas, etc. So I think there's room for big, small, and in fact, that's going on. The bipolar world is happening right now. And so if you all remember your early days of learning about the world, it was basically a normal curve where the average was everyone and then it tailed off either side. And what we're seeing in virtually all measures is this little blip either end. So while you have the average still a big normal curve, whether you're talking about young and old, or a billion people going to bed hungry every night and another billion people being overweight and overnourished, the bipolar world is happening around us right now. And I think we'll see more of that in the world as we go forward, a diversification, a fragmentation on one side, but then coming together on the other. So I think both, which sounds like a cop-out, but I think that's what's going to happen.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, just here.
So my question, I'm John Alexander. I run an organisation called the New Citizenship Project. So by way of context, there's significant evidence that more often people are exposed to advertising and more broadly to the language of the consumer in particular, that they become more self-interested, less likely to care about the environment or society, and less motivated to participate as active citizens in their local community or the national community. So, example one study, half the sample, survey of environmental and social attitudes, half the sample, it says consumer response study, half the sample says citizen response study. Levels of environmental or social motivation significantly lower on the consumer response study. So, and there's similar results coming from environmental primes like exposure to advertising and so on. So as a result, there's this hypothesis forming that the prevalence of advertising, the ubiquity of advertising and marketing in our lives actually is kind of undermining political engagement, public motivation around issues like climate change in and of itself. So, and at the same time, marketing is going into ever more places, data and so on. So with that by way of context, I suppose my questions to you would be, as a kind of leader of business and marketing and the role of marketing in society, what could be the role of brands in encouraging people to think of themselves not just as consumers but as citizens and to vote not just with their wallet but in reality? And should there be limits, perhaps, and could the Unilever be a voice for the idea that there might be limits on where brands could and should be in our lives? I'm not saying that in a kind of, but to give advertising and marketing the kind of license to operate that it perhaps needs.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you that there's good advertising and bad advertising, good marketing and bad marketing. In fact, what you're saying is absolutely supporting my premise on this need to move to a different type of marketing. I don't know if any of you are Ben & Jerry's fans, but just go and look at some of the causes that Ben & Jerry's still very much champion. Engaging people to think about the world in a different way. And I think increasingly, brands are going to have different voices. And I don't think we should see advertising as a bad thing because it's called advertising. I think as I say, you can do advertising badly, you can do advertising well. And what I'd certainly encourage is brands having greater depth. And that's why I think at the thought of brands with purpose, brands actually being able to think broader than just the one dimension of, say, personal wash is whiter. It does, but that alone I don't think is enough any longer. And brands have to think broader and start thinking about, what is their role in society? What other things can they bring and do? Now, there's lots of great things that brands do. I mean, companies employ people, they pay lots of tax, they actually are a way to keep society going, and brands are all a part of that. But what we need to make sure is there's a right role for brands, that they actually step up to their responsibilities, as you're saying, as much as they should. And I agree with you.
Okay, yeah, next question. Try and keep these quite tight, these questions, because there are quite a few of them, and I've got my eye on the time.
Hello. Hi, Phil Drew from Fishburne. Keith, you mentioned that 60% of your environmental footprint is tied up with consumer use. And you also mentioned about being transparent on the progress you've made. I think on the website you described that progress as limited and remains challenging. So the question is just what's worked and what hasn't?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And again, I'm very happy for any of you to help me on this one. Getting people consumers to change behaviour is difficult. We know it ourselves, don't we? Have anyone ever tried to lose weight or give up smoking? Changing your behaviour is tough, and getting people to change behaviour is not easy. And we're finding different ways of doing it. So we have our own little program. 5 levers of change. We know that if someone doesn't change a habit for 28 days, it doesn't stick. So our hand washing program, for instance, where we teach people how to hand wash, we don't count that person has learned how to hand wash unless they've done it for 28 days. And that's when you see a habit change. So our biggest challenge is people changing habits. And you won't be surprised that I have a most fabulous chief supply chain officer who's committed to this whole thing as well. He's already got 48% of our agricultural raws sourced sustainably, because he's working directly with the supply chain. He's made it very clearly that by 2020, we're out unless you're sustainable. So come with us with the journey, because by 2020, you ain't going to be a supplier of ours if you haven't got your act together. I'm afraid I can't say that to the consumers in the same way. Come with me on the journey, or I won't supply you as a consumer in 2020. So I think we've got lots more work to do. I think the things that we have learned is selling the benefit other than sustainability is being the most positive journey. So I don't know, you here use one of our deodorant products. We're the largest deodorant company in the world. We love deodorants. And what we've just launched in the UK is these compressed deodorants. So they're smaller. This was a huge battle, because as soon as we started selling smaller deodorants, they're technically easy to do. Everyone thinks you're going to get less deodorant, hence less value than a big one. And so we're on a journey there. Now, the positive news is landing well, but there's a huge business risk in that. Now, everyone benefits. The retailers have less product taking space on shelves, so hence paying for less lighting or less transport, etc. The consumer has a product which is just as good and takes up less room in their shopping basket. And then we're producing something that's smaller as well. So everybody wins, but it's a real tough thing to land. I think you're right. It's the toughest challenge we have.
Yeah, let's come over here.
My name is Peter Knight. I'm chairman of Context, the sponsor of this great event. Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. You've spoken about blue bottle, green bottle marketing. You've spoken about the journey, and you've spoken about purpose. Could you help us understand what is the journey that Lynx would take from here on?
Yeah. Well, I think Lynx is on its own journey, Lynx, or Axe if you're not from the UK. And it's interesting, I don't know if you saw recently the Peace One Day that Lynx did about sort of, it was basically sort of a whole sort of positioning around basically, a combination of make love, not war type approach. So the thought was kiss for peace, and we did a whole thing with Peace One Day on that. So I think Lynx is on a journey as well, and it's got to find its own responsible tone in the whole thing. Will it end up being kiss for peace? I don't know. It's still early days. But you'll see Lynx evolve. You'll see Axe evolve. By the way, will it still be about young guys and young guys' wish to being more attractive to young girls? Absolutely. That's a very much part of links. But how are we going to do it in a way that sits under our overall mission?
All right. Yeah, in the middle there, and then we'll come to the gentleman at the back.
Hi, Keith. Paul Harris from Unite Group PLC. I have a similar remit to you in a much, much smaller company. I love everything you're doing. It's really inspirational. I do have one minor gripe, which is looking at the Sustainable Living Plan and everything else that you've edited and pulled together. It appears to me that there's much more focus on sustainable sourcing and procurement, fair trade, all of those kinds of laudable things, and much less focus on what happens when those products are actually used. So you still use sodium lauryl sulfate, parabens, all of these things which have been proved to be harmful for either people and waterways. There are loads of companies now who don't use them. When are you going to stop using them?
So, as you say, it's a whole breadth of agenda, and I wouldn't agree with everything you've said, including your comment about parabens, but that's what we can disagree and talk about later. But you're right, it has to be the whole chain. So, could we, tomorrow, come up with products that were better on a whole length of sustainable issues? Absolutely. Could they be done at the same cost in an efficient way? No. And as I was saying earlier, I'm looking for a sustainable solution. I'm looking for a solution where we can produce great products that are going in the right way, that can be very appealing to consumers and fit into our sustainable agenda at the same time. So yes, there's lots of ingredients we're taking out and reducing. There's an awful lot we're doing. If you look at our food agenda, for example, around salt and sugar, etc., and it's a journey, but we'll do it in such a way that we'll make progress and we'll continue to have a growing business and provide products that you all want and like. And that pace is the pace we're managing.
Yeah, there was someone at the back there. Yeah. Hi. Okay, and then we'll come to you.
So Ben Kellard from Forum for the Future. I want to just bring this down to a level of the brand manager who's often obviously really busy under a lot of pressure with targets and so on. Could you share some insights from your experience on what are some of the barriers for thinking and operating very differently under the model you describe? And what are the insights which really unlock and engage those brand managers?
Yeah, no, a really good question. Because at the end of the day, it is everyone out there in all our companies that do the work. I think the first thing is the positive. Let's start on the positive, and then we'll talk about the challenge. The positive is, and it's particularly true for these sort of 18 to 30-year-olds, which are horribly called millennials. I don't know if you like that title, but I think it's something that always jars on me slightly. But anyway, the 18 to 30-year-olds is people are looking at businesses that are willing to do a little bit more for the future. They've seen that our generation have basically stolen from their future financially and stolen from their future environmentally. And they're going to have to be the people who put it right. And hence, they are more interested to work for companies that have a more progressive attitude in this area and indeed an agenda, etc. So I'd argue for all companies, unless you start getting your mind around this, you're going to have a talent problem going forward because people are going to start voting with their feet to work for companies that have a more proactive agenda in this area. So that's the positive side of it. And hence, I find a lot of brand managers are really excited and want to take part on this journey. On the negative side, and some of the challenges, I think firstly is what appears as conflicting KPIs, conflicting key performance indicators. And I think you were hinting on that in the way you were talking about, well, hold on, how can you have A and B, and don't they pull people apart? And that's why the integration is really important. So if it is, and actually to come back to the gentleman in the middle who was challenging that, if it really is, the brief is about sustainability, do everything right for sustainability or whatever, and then on the other side, then your business halves and quarters and disappears. Well, you might have a very sustainable business, but if it's disappeared, then you've got nothing of nothing sort of thing. And so it's that balance between how do we drive the agenda forward, make meaningful progress. Absolutely, I'll be the first person to condemn greenwash, etc. Make meaningful progress, but do it in a way that both drives the business and drives the sustainability agenda.
And keeps investors happy.
Well, it keeps us all happy.
Right.
I mean, because the principle, you can read it on the Unilever website. Our primary stakeholder for Unilever is our consumers, And following that, our customers and our employees and society. And if we can make all those people happy, then our shareholders will be well rewarded because they'll have a healthy, growing business. And that, I think that's the right focus to get a business to be strong for the future.
Right, let me take 2 more questions. There was, yeah, the guy with the hand up there, and then I'll come to the front.
Hi, Stephen Greenfield from EY. In the context of brands as influencers, interested in your view either from the perspective of Unilever or collectively on what evidence exists for the sustainable behavioural change you mentioned in developed markets, so probably outside of the Lifebuoy example.
Yeah, it's often assumed that the sustainability agenda is more vibrant in developed markets than developing because of the sort of the well-meaning people on the western east coast of America or living in Islington. You don't live in Islington, do you? No. In the UK.
I think Jim does.
But that actually proves from certainly our research not to be the case, and certainly people in developing markets actually see the impact of poor environmental and social sustainability much more up close and personal. The problems around sanitation, you don't worry about sanitation because at the end of the day, you have a nice room somewhere in your house where it magically disappears, goes underground and off it goes. If you're living in a place where, like in India, where you've got nearly 1 billion people openly defecating to this day, you can see some of the challenges right around you as you walk around villages. So I think some of the challenges, or if you're living right on the edge of a polluted river that you're both washing in and then having to get drinking water out of, or that your family have diarrhea regularly because the quality of the water isn't good enough. So they see a lot of these challenges up close and personal. In fact, you see some of the things around pollution in cities in the developing markets and some of the big protests that are coming out. I would say they're every bit as developed. And so I would argue across the world, now of course it varies in different parts of countries, but across the world we're seeing this increasing concern about our future.
One more question. Yeah, right here.
Thanks. Simon Abrams here from EY. You mentioned that you'd baked in purpose into all your brands, but surely the purpose for many of the brands is to sell more stuff through mattering to people. How important is purpose? A lot of companies are talking about purpose. How important is purpose in driving this agenda forwards?
So I wouldn't define purpose as sell more stuff. I think you might have an objective to sell more stuff, etc. So purpose is much more about what in your brand is going to resonate with the people you're trying to serve about the brand. So let's take an example. Dirt is good. So dirt is good is something that we do around Persil in the UK or Omo around the world. And the notion here, quite simply, that rather than say it's all about get your clothes whiter, or cleaner, 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 is actually getting dirty is good. And mum, you should encourage your kid to go out and get dirty because that's about child development, and it's about experimenting and playing and getting involved. And in that way, your child will grow and learn, etc. And don't worry, by the way, because if they get dirty, Persil will sort it out. So there's a whole purpose around Persil around child development. Or, I say, with Dove around self-esteem, making people think about beauty in a different way. Only 4% of women think they are beautiful. 96% of women are hugely self-critical of their own beauty. So if Dove can somehow try and break down that myth and make people think in a different way about their personal self-esteem, about the amount of girls who stop going swimming and going to gym and taking dance lessons and voting out of activities because they don't feel attractive enough to do those activities. There's a terrible thing going on right now. Now, the work Dove does with the Girl Guides is very much about their purpose, about how do you engage people in a different way of thinking about themselves and how they engage with that whole topic. So those are the sort of things about purpose. It's something bigger and beyond just the functional benefit of the brand.
Stuart Rose, apparently his Damascene moment was watching Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth. What's your moment?
I I can think of several moments, but this time I can try and make it as dramatic as Stuart Rose. I'm in competition now. Well, obviously, I mean, I think Inconvenient Truth was a fabulous engagement. Although, funny enough, I still find that, and I also think everything Al Gore has done has been brilliant. And I think as a world, we probably did better that he wasn't president of the United States, and he went on to do what he was doing at the time. I think probably someone who had a real impact on me was a young girl by the name of Ms. Suzuki back in Rio in 1992. And it's well worth looking this up on YouTube. 12 years old at the time. And she basically goes out and speaks to the people gathered there in Rio those many years ago. And some great lines I think you'll still remember right now. But you know, she goes on and obviously talks to them about how important they are, but then brings them all down, saying, "But you were all once, you know, you all were children, and you were all, you know, someone's child," and then goes on to talk about, you know, why do you keep breaking things you don't know how to fix? And that thought about why do you keep breaking things you don't know how to fix? Well, I thought it was a tremendous line. Yeah, it came from a 12-year-old. That resonates because I think we break lots of stuff we don't know how to fix. And I'd encourage all of you to go and look her up on YouTube. It's truly inspirational from a very young voice.
Keith, thank you very much indeed for your candour. Thank you very much for putting up with my basic grasp of this subject matter. Keith Weed, everyone, and thank you very much to you for your questions.
Yeah, thank you.